Welcome back, everyone, to Unclassified number 16. Last week, I regrettably said we are so back. And this week, I regret to inform you not only we're not back, but it's worse than the week previously. In fact, it's worse than it's ever been. So we are not back, and it's actually truly, madly, deeply over. But to get us started here, Preston, explain to our audience why it's truly, madly, deeply over.
This is it. This is the end. I saw people, I don't know if it's a troll or not. I'm going to leave their names out of it. But talking about how to find citizenship in other countries right now on X. Proud Americans, I will say.
Yeah.
Again, I don't know if that's just trolling because it got some attention. So I don't know. Maybe that's just the move right now. They're trying to get the clicks. But yeah, the last week. Huh?
Where would you go if you couldn't live here? Where would you go?
I've thought about living in somewhere in South or Central America.
Really?
Yeah, I like Belize. They speak English.
Do they?
Yeah. Wow. I mean, a lot of places around the world speak English, but like, if I remember correctly, like I think the official language in Belize is English.
Well, the more you know. I'd go to Australia, maybe the UK.
I feel bad that I'm constrained by that language piece. But yeah, I don't know. I've thought about that before. I'm not seriously considering that at all right now, but I've thought about, maybe taking the show on the road at some point and spending a year or two abroad.
That would be cool. You study abroad at your wife's like, you're 40, dude, and you're just like, I'm studying abroad.
Studying abroad, yeah. Get those tax breaks. Didn't we meet a guy at NATO who took advantage of some like UAE tax break or something where he went?
Yes, I forget his name, but yeah, he founded a company in the UK, and then he went to Dubai, where he just didn't pay taxes then.
For like 5 years. But he had to stay there for 5 years or something,
Yeah,
right?
5 years.
Because I remember him saying, I'm going back as soon as it's over.
He was like 19, too. He's a nice kid, but yeah, yeah, that's exactly what he was doing.
So, all right. Back to the serious subject at hand. So Ben and I, look, we roll the dice every week when we decide to record, and I think it's been for the best that we've kind of stuck with a set time each week. Yes, Ben, do you have a question? You're raising your hand.
Well, I don't have a question. I just have to generally state something. So right now it's 9:38 a.m. Friday on March 7th, 2025. Trump will be doing remarks in 20 minutes. God. So that means everything we talk about right now may be incorrect again. And he does it to us every week. He refuses to come on, and he continues to do this.
Just the level of disrespect there
right.
is outrageous.
Who does this guy think he is? What do you think, he's the president? Yeah.
He's not cleared any of those comments with us. Or anyone. Or maybe even his cabinet. I would argue that his cabinet usually doesn't know what he's going to say. But all right. We're going to rope it back in.
Yeah, we got to get it locked in.
So last week, we had this episode before Zelensky went to the White House. And that meeting in the White House has been listed as like the moment that the U.S. and European relationship fell apart. So like, I don't want to overstate it, but it was pretty big. Zelensky went in with the idea, everybody was kind of assuming that this was going to be the signing of a mineral deal that would lead to some sort of future peace in Ukraine. Went well for quite a while, about 40 minutes of just kind of what you would expect, which is, I should note, kind of a long time to just have the cameras rolling before an official meeting takes place, but all good. All the notes coming out of it, all the clips, watching the thing start to finish looked like a normal meeting. Nothing really out of the ordinary there. Zelensky said thank you to President Trump a couple times and to the American people, and then it just flew off the rails.
What happened?
Well, so this is something I don't know how much it's worth getting into the weeds on this because part of me thinks the details of the actual conversation is less important than the fallout. So there are arguments that Zelensky was not grateful enough that he came in not wearing a suit. There's arguments that Vice President Vance kind of baited him into arguing in the White House. But and it's kind of a Rorschach test, I think is the right term, where the people that like Trump and Vance tend to see it one way, and the people that dislike them tend to see it another way. But either way, that entire video is out there for public consumption. The major takeaway is that Zelensky was asked to leave the White House. Nothing was signed. And in very short order, the next couple days, we saw the U.S. stop weapon shipments to Ukraine entirely, not future ones, but like ones that are in Poland getting ready to cross the border, and turn off all intelligence sharing with Ukraine. In fact, earlier today, it came out that I feel like this is something we need to wait for confirmation on, but it's coming through some pretty reliable sources that we actually asked Maxar Technologies, a satellite company, satellite imagery company, to also stop sharing unclassified intel with Ukraine. And they have done that in the past, like not with Ukraine, but they have shut off access to their products for certain countries in the past at certain times. So that's not like a new thing. It's just new that we're doing that to Ukraine. So when I say the contents of the meeting maybe aren't as important as the fallout, that's why. We've seen a lot of pressure on Ukraine since that meeting. We've seen Ukraine come back and say, nobody wants peace like we do. We're ready to sign this agreement as soon as you guys are. But that's about where it sits today. Is that about what you're tracking, Ben? Fill in any gaps there.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. Yeah, I mean, there are rumors, that we have like effectively not disabled the Patriot missile system, but rendered it ineffective due to cutting off data links. Same with HIMARS. I mean, we're just letting civilians die. Like we still do the ISR flights, right? Like we're still doing them. We see the bombers taking off, but we're just letting them hit Ukrainian cities and not telling them. Because why exactly?
And there's a lot of details here that we're glossing over because a lot of the details aren't known, and I feel like we should clarify that. There's no indication that we've stopped any sort of intelligence gathering against Russia. I'd be very surprised if we did that. So Ben is correct in the sense that we've just decided to not share that information. Now, our European allies do have a lot of intelligence capabilities themselves and are still sharing information with Ukraine. However, we shouldn't expect that there is a 100% overlap with our friends. Like, that's one of the benefits of having allies is we don't watch everything all the time because some of the gaps are filled in by our NATO allies. So it goes both ways. There's no way that NATO has complete coverage. When we say we're going to stop everything, I would say it is impossible that NATO fills that gap immediately, maybe over the long term. There's also a lot of questions about what our abilities are to kind of remotely disable weapon systems, and that's still up in the air. Something like a cannon artillery, M777, you're not doing anything with that from the United States, but it is possible that we've got some sort of effect on things like the Patriot, on things like ATACMS, HIMARS, and the long-range munitions, F-16s even.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is absolutely absurd. And I will say the thing that's so fascinating about the fallout of all this, right, is that the Trump administration, or I shouldn't say the Trump administration, their enablers, or at least the people on social media who talk about them say, well, how come, now it's time for Europe to do it. Europe should do it. It's for 80 years, all 32 of us, or at one point, it was 18 of us and 6 of us, but it gets bigger. The family gets bigger, right? We all just split up the duties. And now the whole Trump apparatus is just like, well, how come they weren't doing what we were doing? What do you mean? We said we'll do X, Y, Z. We said you do A, B, C, E, F, G. And now man, they're not doing X, Y. I don't know. It's very dumb.
This is something I've been thinking about a little bit recently, which is just in the last couple of days, which is, like, personally, I disagree with the policies that we're approaching Ukraine with right now. I think we're pressuring Ukraine more than we're pressuring Russia. I don't think that is a good approach given the current realities on the ground and the current geopolitical realities. I think those roles should be reversed. That said, I have this weird feeling of, like, in this case, I disagree with the direction that we are taking our relationship with Europe and with Ukraine. But if it's the direction that we are going, I would like to see it done well. And in this case, I'm hard pressed to see how some of these rapid decisions and kind of bungled execution is a net benefit anywhere. So in this case, let's say we decided, hey, we're going to turn off aid to Ukraine unless you guys come to the table, which is essentially the argument that the Trump administration is making right now. They could have just not approved the next package. They could have given it a 90-day window, a 60-day window, a 30-day window, a week, anything. I mean, even if you said in 6 months we're going to stop, Europe's not going to be able to backfill that 100% quite yet. So there's going to be some pain felt. The fact that we did that overnight, though, is hard for me to get my head around. It seems like we almost lost leverage in that sense. We definitely burned some bridges. Our European allies and allies in the Asia Pacific have to be looking at that and thinking, wow, no warning, the U.S. just backed out. I have a hard time understanding the execution of the policy at this point.
Oh, I fully agree. We just pulled out randomly. We didn't give anyone a heads up, and then then they just mocked them and said, "Well, Europe can do it themselves." I mean, you didn't give anyone a heads up. You just left.
And what I don't get though is like, how is that better than even saying in 2 weeks we're going to? Like, no shit, we're not messing around. 2 weeks, we're shutting it off. Like, we've seen that play out with the tariffs, and I think we're going to get into this in a little bit with Mexico and Canada, where we threatened it. Then we laid back and said, give it 30 days. Fix these things or else. So we took more of a hands-off kind of give it time approach with the economic issues, whereas the life and death aid that is going into Ukraine, we did not. That's hard for me to understand why that decision is better.
Well, and one of the terms they place for it to get put back on is that Ukraine and Russia have to agree to come to the table in order for Ukraine to get its aid back, in order for us to continue sharing intelligence. The intelligence that we also blocked our allies from sharing with them as well. I just don't get it. I mean, who's writing the rule? Like, is Donald Trump Vladimir Putin in a wig? Like, what do you mean that Ukraine and Russia have to agree to come to the peace table in order for Ukraine's aid to come back? Like, does that make any sense to you?
I used to get so frustrated when we were talking about in Iraq or Afghanistan, we'd put dates out and say we're going to end the war by this date or we're going to withdraw by that date. Because and to get down into the details, we would even say it about bases. Like, hey, we're going to close this fob on April 1st. And it was so frustrating to see that. And I think most people agreed with that frustration of like, why are you telling the enemy how long they have to wait? I believe, I could be mistaken, but I believe Trump has actually made a similar statement related to the Taliban. Like, why would we tell them why they just need to wait us out kind of thing? So in this case, that is frustrating because
Mr. Art of the Deal must have forgotten his craft.
Well, there's no indications right now that Russia wants to come to the table is part of the problem. So to me, what we're seeing is not necessarily, I think it might help to understand the situation, to view it from the sense of the United States wants to permanently stop aid shipments to Ukraine. And we want to walk away from this saying that we tried, there's nothing we can do, and fully disengage. If you look at the actions that have been taken through that lens, I think it starts to make more sense. I disagree with it, but I think that it makes more sense. Tell me what scenario military aid is turned back on in this conflict. Like, their whole point is trying to bring about an end to the war. And they said they're not going to turn it on until there are meetings. Like, get out of here. So you're telling me that after a first round of peace talks, then the Trump administration is going to say, got it, send the ATACMs. It's hard for me to believe that aid is coming back on. And to hammer on the Russian point here, the statements from Russia recently have been counter to peace. Now, maybe this is more an argument for there's nothing we can do and we're going to walk away. But they have talked about how European peacekeepers on the continent or in Ukraine is off the table. They view that as NATO, and they view that as an act of aggression. That is something that we offered early on. They have said that talking about the territorial control, off the table. So all of those territories that Russia has claimed, even the ones they haven't physically taken, are off the table. So and just last night they launched one of their largest missile and drone attacks of the entire war. Like, they have said that they have not yet accomplished all of the goals of the special military operation. There's nothing they're saying is we're ready for peace talks. It's quite the opposite. So, anyways, I'll back it off there.
No, I agree with you. Yeah.
It doesn't feel like we're trying to get a peace deal. It feels like we're trying to find an exit for the United States.
I would agree. I think it also, like, it feels like we're just trying to blow it all up. Right? Like, not just find an exit, just, like, blow up everything on the way out for an undisclosed reason.
I need to work on a video. It's been an idea I've had for a couple weeks. I think you and I talked about this in Abu Dhabi, where I want to piece together how I think the U.S. withdrawing from this conflict entirely makes escalation more likely.
Yes.
And I need to piece that together into a coherent video, but essentially it's the argument that much of Europe is more hawkish in this conflict than we are.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the constraints of you can't use these munitions in this place or that place. If you remember, Ukraine did not tell the United States when they were going to go into Kursk because they were like, we've done this before, and they just tell us not to do it, and it ends up hurting us long term. So we restrained Ukraine in a lot of ways, which technically you could argue did the job of not escalating the conflict, because it hasn't really escalated in the way that we would consider, other European nations or the United States directly involved. But when we're gone and no longer doing that, and France right now, Macron, Napoleon Part 2, like,
Yeah, Macron, yeah.
Holy shit, these guys, like, it's hard to see right now that they are going to restrain Zelensky. It seems like the exact opposite. So, yeah.
If the United States is not going to uphold Article 5, as President Trump said, what's stopping? I mean, if you're Macron, if you're Merz, or I guess Scholz is still there, you're Finland, Starmer. I mean, what's stopping you? I mean, do you just wait till you think maybe the war ends? Do you try to buy time to rearm? I don't know. I think what exactly is stopping you from just going in now? And that was their train of thought at the very beginning of this conflict, and they were restrained by President Biden every step of the way. And now Trump's taken off the leash by just leaving the house. So, if you're Europe, why don't you escalate? Why don't you just go for it?
And that actually gets to something else that's been on my mind, which is kind of this split in how people are viewing the conflict right now. It's really frustrating to see people break it out as people who want peace and people who want war, because I don't think that's an accurate assessment. The way that it falls is Ukraine does want peace, but they don't want a fake peace that leads to another war in the short term. Europe tends to be in that camp, and people are presenting that as pro-war, which I don't think is accurate. It's the right peace. And that does not mean that they need to fight for another 5 years or something. It's that we need to find a way to make sure that Russia doesn't do what they've done 2 times prior now. And it seems like there's a split in a group looking backwards and a group looking forwards in terms of what is more important. So from my perspective, the group that is pushing peace at all costs is looking backwards. Look at the destruction. Look at the lives lost. Look at the money spent. This has to stop. The group looking forward are the ones saying, look at what this can turn into. If we don't stop this the right way now, here's where it will go. It won't stop here. It will get worse for Ukraine in the short term and get worse for Europe in the long term, and might even make its way to a direct impact of the United States. That's why it can't stop like this now. So it feels like there's this split of look, and I don't know if it plays out that way in other events and other topics, but it seems to me like there's a very much backwards looking versus forwards looking approach to how this comes to a close.
I agree. I also think that Europeans have seen this before. They know how it ends, right? They the whole thing that brought peace to the continent was untold destruction because of a peace at any cost deal, right? I said this in my NATO video I published, but Chamberlain and Hitler met at the very beginning of the conquest, right? He had already taken Austria, now he was moving into Czechoslovakia. That's when the deal was made. Trump and Putin are now, they're trying to negotiate a peace 11 years into this, and Trump is acting like Chamberlain. They're not going to attack. He gave me his word. He's not going to keep going. He's going to stop. So we need to force Ukraine to make peace. I mean, I would just hope. I know he's reading through a world history book right now, and he's still in the McKinley era, but I'd hope he skipped a few chapters and got to 1938, because it seems like you're right. We are spiraling towards a larger war, maybe even a world war, and we're just enabling it for maybe. I don't think the administration realizes that we're enabling it.
This is, and there's, I feel like people often split that of, it's either, there's some great comedian, I think it was Jon Stewart recently, that there was, it's either peace or World War III. He's like, I mean, shit, everything sounds good when the alternative is World War III. So, like, I'll take anything that is the alternative to that. And I feel like a lot of times with the World War II comparisons, it's that. It's like, we have to fight, or we're going to have to fight a bigger war. And I just want to say, I think the security guarantee argument that's being had right now is the appropriate middle ground.
Yeah.
Because it may or may not escalate. And I think we need to be honest about that. Like, it is entirely possible that Putin takes a little bit of Ukraine and settles in and retires and says, that's all I really wanted to do. We can't see the future. That's possible. I think that is a big risk to assume that that's going to be the case, right? But there's a line here where we don't have to go all in right now to defeat Russia entirely. We also don't have to let them do what they want until we get pulled into a war in the future. The middle ground is that security guarantee. Putin has not attacked NATO, ever. Like, there's a reason for that. It's not a mistake. He's attacked just about everybody else nearby him. So a security guarantee, whether or not it's NATO, to say, hey, got it. We are going to stop the fighting now. You do this again, it's going to be trouble. That is not something that we really were able to do back in World War II, and we kind of just let things get out of control until all of a sudden there was a global war. So I wish the security guarantee got more attention. It's something that Zelensky in Europe are hammering on, and it's a point that the United States appears not all that interested in. We've kind of talked about it being between the lines of an economic deal. That doesn't have teeth. And if you're Ukraine, you wouldn't view that as having any value at this point.
I totally agree. And I think what's interesting is that, like, security guarantees are what we do best. We have so many. We have the most in the world. And they largely keep the peace, right? Because if you attack the Philippines, you attack Japan, if you attacked Europe, you know what's coming, right? So you just don't do it. And, like, it doesn't cost us any money, right? Especially when we stack our alliances in such an effective way, that the fact that we're, like, not willing to extend it is so mind-blowingly dumb. It would be so easy. You freeze it at the way it is, freeze the borders as they are. In exchange, Ukraine gets they get security guarantees, and the United States can move in, and Russia doesn't have to like it. But you just say, do it, right? There's a reason Russia fears a direct confrontation with the United States. Do it. I also don't buy this argument that we need to abandon Ukraine so we can stack up for China, because this war is the whole reason our ammunition stockpiles and our weapon factories are growing. Like, never has American manufacturing on our own arms been this strong, at least in the post-Cold War era. And so now they're getting rid of those factories, right? They're shutting down the biggest one in Oklahoma. They're firing ones at the people in Scranton. What are we doing? Like, we're just, we're not preparing for anything. We're just destroying everything.
The argument of we need to prepare for China, I think, is valid. I haven't seen people be able to bring the receipts for that actually mattering right now. And what I mean by that is we really haven't still done any sort of pivot towards Asia. at all. I mean, I guess technically until yesterday, we hadn't really been disparaging of our Asian allies until
Right?
Trump said, like, Japan isn't going to defend us. So I don't know. Maybe we're going to head in that direction. Europe had taken the most of the brunt of our anger in the last few weeks. So I guess there's that. But we haven't seen an increase in troop deployments in the Pacific, an increase in exercise with our allies, notably, right? Like it's been slowly increasing, but nothing in terms of a major shift. And so to your point, we are kind of revamping the defense industrial base because of what's happening in Europe, but also a European war and a China war are fought very, very differently. So we don't have like there is some overlap, like Stingers, for instance, anti-aircraft missiles, man-portable anti-air defense systems. We would like to be able to send a lot of those to Taiwan. Those are also heavily utilized in Ukraine. We have a shortage of those. We're not making them as fast as we can. That's a good example. But like artillery shells, not going to be a heavy component of a war with China. Just not how that plays out. Much more air and sea focused than artillery, Bradleys, and Abrams. So, like, yes and no. But then I always get frustrated with, like, so let's bring it back. Let's fix that. Let's make more. That seems like something that we can resolve ourselves. Because what I think is probably going to happen is we will see a turn away from Europe and a turn away from Ukraine. We will not see a change to that defense industrial base. And should something happen in the Pacific, we will still be having a conversation about not having the necessary munitions to be able to do that.
Absolutely. It feels like it, at least the America I knew until a couple days ago was like the America in that like Toby Keith song, you know what I'm talking about? Like, and now it just feels like we just can't, the administration's convinced we can't do anything, right? You know, we can't do two things at once. We can't have the largest manufacturing base in the world. We can't do anything anymore. And I don't know. I always believed America was much more than that. So I'm very disappointed to see this attitude of can't.
In the purely selfish camp, something that's been confusing as well is we sell a lot of weapons to our allies around the world.
150
lot
unique
of
weapons every year.
Yeah. And these actions in recent days, not just the actions, but the words towards Europe, has forced them to start to look at what can we do to completely separate from the U.S. defense industry. And understandably so. Like, that shouldn't be a shock to anybody. So we're giving up weapon sales, likely. And we'll see if Europe is actually able to come through and to what degree they're able to do that, which would be a win for them, for sure. And I think indirectly a benefit to the United States. But, like, selfishly, that's a lot of money the United States is giving up because of these decisions. And
I don't even think it's selfishly. We need Europe as an export market. We need our NATO members as an export market because when we make these state-of-the-art fighter jets, we need economies of scale. The F-22 was supposed to be like the main fighter. We ordered 750 of them. We only ended up getting 170, but only 130 are operational. Why? Because without people to sell it to, because we made it so we couldn't export it, the cost of the fighter jet in modern dollars was over $500 million. The F-35 right now is $80 million. That is because we are able to export it to other nations, to Australia, to our NATO allies, to Japan, to Israel. Now we need this, and without it, we won't be able to build things like the F-35 anymore. We'll just have a bunch of F-22s and B-2 bombers around. You know there are more blimps in the world than B-2 bombers? We're supposed to buy 130 of those. 130. And now we have 21. There are 25 blimps in the world. Simply because without anyone to export it to, it rose to $2 billion per unit. That's crazy. And these are costs that are prohibitive even for us. And so I've done the math on this. If we did not have an export market, the F-35 would be $470 million per plane. And we put an order in for 2,000 of them, right? And when you add in contracts and maintenance, you're looking at nearly $3 trillion right off the bat. That's half of like our yearly revenue and taxes. It just we can't.
It's a big number.
Yeah, we can't. Giving up these contracts and destroying it will be. I mean, we may not feel it now, but in 10, 15 years, maybe even 5, we will feel it because it is cost prohibitive.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing that I have a hard time squaring right now because I feel like there were ways, imagine a scenario where we said, hey, in 60 days, we're going to stop providing aid to Ukraine, Russia, or Europe. Here's all the stuff we have set aside. We'd love to sell it to you. 75 cents on the dollar. 90 cents on the dollar. Screw it. Right? Like, hey, we're going to stop providing aid directly to Ukraine, but Europe, we're going to ramp up our manufacturing base to hire more people, open more factories, and you can buy whatever you want from us, and we will happily send it to you to give to Ukraine.
Yeah.
Like what was the problem? What was the problem there?
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. Why are they turning it? It doesn't make any sense to me to be like, we're not going to give aid to Ukraine, but also we're not going to sell you guys weapons anymore, and we might turn them off. And also, you can't buy our weapons and give it to Ukraine. That doesn't make any sense. There's no strategy here.
Super. Well, speaking of strategy, let's switch over to the European Union, because it seems like we actually are seeing some steps there. Talk right now. So we should say that. It's talk, not necessarily actions, but can you bring us up to speed?
Yes. So it is truly, madly, deeply over. I think that's a Savage Garden song, isn't it? Truly,
Sounds
madly,
about right.
deeply.
Sounds about right, yeah.
Well, I've had it on the mind today because it's, Anyway, so yesterday, Trump in the Oval Office says that he will not honor Article 5 of countries that don't pay, and he says they need to pay. Earlier in the day, there was a story on NBC News, and they said Trump will only protect those that pay a set price of the GDP, of like the percentage of GDP. Now, most of the alliance meets this. The ones that don't is like Iceland, Canada, Italy, no one on the front lines, right? So is he singling them off? And so the thought is that he's actually just going to try to push the 5% of GDP mark and say, well, if you don't pay this, I'm not coming to your defense, which no one in the alliance currently meets, not even the United States. Even Poland's a whole percentage point off from that. So that kind of sent a rattle throughout the continent. And then he said that he does not believe that the U.S.'s NATO allies would come to their defense. And this really set Macron off, who gave a very impassioned speech about how France has always come to the aid of the United States from the very beginning with Marquis Lafayette, that guy from Hamilton. But he it's a bad joke. But, from Marquis Lafayette then to how we're tied together through Pershing and Normandy, and then how they came to our aid after 9/11 and went to Afghanistan with us for 20 years. He gave this very impassioned speech, very upset with the accusation because Trump specifically named that France would not come to the United States aid, which is, Trump would now be the second person in his administration to forget about the war in Afghanistan. Because as you remember earlier in the week, J.D. Vance said that France and the UK were countries that hadn't fought a war in 40, 50 years, which the British tabloids have been having a field day with that because nearly 500 Brits died in Afghanistan. France as well. The entire alliance went. And so there's been a lot of fallout there. And so of any two relationships to destroy, we're doing a pretty good job with the UK and France. And then, as if the Article 5 comment wasn't bad enough, you now have Finland preparing for Trump to not uphold his end of the bargain, and they're trying to figure out how the United States can turn off their weapons in case of a Russian attack and try to potentially backdoor it and remove those limitations. And they're also working to try to remove the U.S.'s ability to do that across the continent. Because they're very concerned, especially we covered last week, the threat they gave to the UK, where they said, look, we're going to, if you are deemed to not be doing what you're told, we're going to turn it off. Then Poland today, right before we came to air, announced that they are developing, where they will be seeking nuclear weapons and unconventional weapons. What does this mean? It means unconventional weapons mean like biological, chemical weapons in addition to nuclear. And they're also calling up every adult male in the country to undergo military training, seeking to add 200,000 to 500,000 more troops. And on top of all that, I mean, we're going to get into what all this means here, but we have to truly get to the bottom of the fallout here. U.S. allies also now no longer feel comfortable sharing intel with the United States, fearing that it may be compromised. They seem to have this inkling. The article doesn't say this, but they seem to have an inkling that the U.S. is giving intelligence to Russia, or may eventually. And this is coming from the UK, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, Israel, and Saudi Arabia. If countries could have best friends, that would be the United Kingdom, and then right behind them,
that's our birthday list there. Yeah.
Yeah. Then behind that, Australia, Canada. I mean, it doesn't get tighter than that. And of course, Israel. But so, I mean, they are questioning whether or not to continue sharing intelligence. They don't trust the U.S. That's a rot way deeper than I think anyone believed. Furthermore, and lastly, I guess I should say, a new poll shows that 40% of Danes believe the U.S. is a threat to them, and 73% of French people no longer consider America an ally. And during my quest to find out how precedented this fallout is, if you recall, the narrative at the time, I was just a kid, but during the global war on terror in Iraq was that the world hated us, right? That Europe was very upset with us.
Yeah.
But when you pull in these polling numbers, I mean, the U.S. never really sunk below 45 to 55% approval rating, and even when they disapprove, they still believe the U.S. to be an ally, that is no longer the case. Not only do they not approve, they also believe us to be a threat and no longer an ally. So we will get into this here deeply, but it seems as though the transatlantic alliance no longer exists.
R.I.P.
It may be on paper, but it seems like we're in total free fall. And I don't know how the United States builds back up that soft power. Even say, Democrats take the House and the Senate in huge majorities, and they impeach all the way down till it's Hakeem Jeffries or Nancy Pelosi or whoever's in charge over there. I don't know how you rebuild it, right? I don't know how you ever get back on this, because Europe is now in its time of need, and the United States is running away. And they're not just running away, they're giving them the middle finger while doing it. And so I don't know how you rebuild this. I don't know how the United States can come back from this. And like a lot of these relationships, as we've covered here, 75, 80 years old. And they have lasted generations of, people who care deeply about each other and countries that have taken risks. I mean, to develop the F-35 like the United States did with Britain, and then Italy and Turkey and Denmark, I mean, that's like a risk, right? Because you could always know that the United States could turn it off, but you took these huge purchases and you went in with them, right? And now they're threatening to turn it off. I mean, you even look at in Australia, an Australian official was saying, we went fully in with the United States with this AUKUS deal, with these grain deals, to be, to help them combat China. And if the United States abandon us, this will be a generational mistake. Because China's being increasingly more aggressive to Australia. So, I mean, these decades of trust, and then all of a sudden it just gets upended, people rightfully feel betrayed, and they're rightfully pretty upset, I'd say. So
I think a lot of this, when you view it in the terms of Trump just says things sometimes, you have to keep that in mind. But we did this week transition from words to actions, and I think that's what's triggered a lot of this. So, The tough talk on Ukraine, I think, was upset, or even the Munich conference speech there by Vice President Vance, I think was upsetting to a lot in Europe. But the shutting off of aid to a country that we agreed to send the aid to and is actively fighting a war, and then turning off the intelligence sharing in the middle of the fight, I think was, to your point, like the kind of thing that's going to be hard to come back from. Like, I'm not saying these relationships are done, but it's hard to understate. Like, it reminds me, maybe this is an awful comparison, and I got a couple here for you, so buckle in.
Okay.
But it reminds me of those videos where, like, a girlfriend jokingly tells the boyfriend that she's pregnant, and the boyfriend breaks up with her. And then she's like, no, it was a joke. Yeah. And they have to, like, somehow come back from this, like, or he does something awful because of that, right? And they, like, have to, and it's like, the mask off moment. It feels a little bit like that's what's happening now, where it's a mask off in a moment where an actual war is being fought, and we are making decisions that are detrimental to the side that is looking to us for assistance. That's going to be tough. That's going to be a lot harder to come back from than a speech at the Munich conference berating European speech laws. The second one, and I want to come back to this, the NATO spend, because I think there's a lot inside of NATO, a lot about NATO that is misunderstood. The 2% of GDP is an unofficial agreement. That is not a law. That is not a part of any treaty. That is essentially all the countries together said, it would be a good idea? 2% would be a good idea. So for a comparison here, and I'll roll the dice to see if this one is better or worse. You'll have to tell me, Ben. I live here in Tennessee. Let's say property taxes are 1%. I pay my 1%. That means the police and the fire department will come when there's a problem at my house. That's legally what I have to pay. But then all of a sudden, maybe all the homeowners say, it'd be a really good idea, 2%, because then things would be even better each year. We should be doing 2%. And maybe some do and some don't, and we'll see. But then eventually the fire department says, we actually aren't going to help anybody who's not paying 2%. It's like, well, that's not the law. That's not what we're obligated to do. And does that give you any confidence that they might next year say, actually, that number's 3% or 5%? We need 5%.
Right.
So, at an individual level, we would push back on that and say, for one, we need to codify this. If we're going to use this as any sort of metric to assist or not assist, we need to codify that. We need to make sure that it is clearly stated and that it's not just this good idea that people meet 2%. I want every NATO country to spend a lot on defense. I think that would be a good thing. The way we go about it is also kind of messy because defense costs are not always number of F-35s and number of artillery rounds. I think you and I were talking about this week, weren't we? We're
yeah, no, maybe. I was in my video. Did you watch my video? I don't know. Maybe it was in there.
Well, we include things in that defense number that you would not traditionally think of as defense related. Yeah. So, soldiers' salaries are included. I feel like that's probably fair. Some portions of veteran healthcare is included. I don't think most people think that is included. When you talk about how much do we spend on defense compared to other nations, usually people are thinking about that as a war-fighting capability. How much money are we putting towards our capability to fight a war? I'm glad that we spend the money that we do on veterans' health and veterans' benefits. I don't think anybody thinks of that when they think of our ability to fight a war overseas next year. So the percentage needs to be codified. We also need to dial in what actually contributes to that number and how should we measure it? Or I think this is what we were getting at. Is there a better way to measure contributions to NATO?
Oh, no, I mean, you're absolutely right. All U.S. military spending is about projecting power and getting to the fight. And so, when you start hand-wringing over whether or not Italy's paying, 2%, it's they have, 5 U.S. bases there? Right? 5 U.S. bases allow you to project power. I mean, they should hit 2%. I agree, but it's also just with a lot of these countries, how many times can they harden a structure? How many times can they, renovate the rail? How many times can they, put in tangible tank brakes and stuff like that? I mean, these are things that you pay for once, and then maybe you pay for maintenance on a few years down the road. It doesn't make any sense, and it's taken on this gospel tier thing, and it's just. I don't know. I just think it's nonsense. It's not a fair metric, and there are better metrics to have. But to me, it just seems like we created something in 2014 as a way to, not get Europe to completely disarm itself, and now it's become the thing that will destroy the alliance.
Something I want to look up here and see if I have the stat, because a big red flag for me is this going to actually have. Is countries, in my opinion, yeah, here we go. This will do it. So defense expenditure, has it grown over the years? And that's a big one for me, from 2014 to 2023. Mm-hmm. The reason I say that's a big one is because in 2014 is when all of a sudden it was oh my God, Russia is invading their neighbor.
Right.
And this was the window from the initial invasion until after the start of this second invasion in 2022. So this, to me, these numbers are important. Have they increased? Now, again, I would like to see some baseline. Everybody should be contributing a fair amount. But some of these countries, they didn't increase at all. So we've got Hungary actually increased a fair amount. Poland increased. But it looks like, Croatia went down during that window. Turkey went down. If I read this correctly, the United States actually went down from about 3.7 to 3.5% during that window. The United Kingdom appears to have gone down. I know they've just now said they're going to go back up to 2.5, but looks like they went from 2.1 to 2.07 or something. So a minor shift. I think that's a big indicator. Because it's not just a matter of are we hitting numbers every single year for the sake of hitting numbers. Because, again, there's no guarantee that each of those countries spending 2% on defense is going to be enough for NATO to win a war. That has not been calculated. That is not what this is. It's not like if we're at 1.8% collectively, we're going to lose to Russia. But at 3%, we steamroll everybody. It's a completely arbitrary number.
Right. And if you're not, there's no, the rule is you have to spend this amount. There's nothing that says it needs to be effective in any way, right?
Unfortunately, yeah.
Like Croatia could just say, all right, you want us to hit 2%? Fine. Here's 2% of our GDP spent exclusively on combat boots.
Yeah, boots.
Whoop-de-doo, It doesn't do anything. It doesn't help the army fight stronger. It also, by increasing the spending the way we do, we kind of eliminate any creativity when it comes to defense. Not every country in Europe needs to emulate the French or the American military. They don't need to emulate the Polish military. I think it's great that Luxembourg, who doesn't hit 2%, instead spends their money on renovating and creating state-of-the-art satellites for the alliance, but also giving money to other nations that can't afford hardware. So, for instance, if Hungary or Croatia or Albania wanted to buy a C-130, this has happened before, then they put their money together, right? And they'll have, we'll have a shared C-130, but they still don't have enough to do it. Luxembourg throws them cash and pays for that. So it's this one percentage does all to tell us if we're going to win. It's nonsense. And I think if President Trump wanted to be constructive, big if, he would, come and say, well, let's do an index of deployable equipment. Let's do a power index. Determine, here's your size of your economy, and here's what you'd be best suited investing in, right? That would be the best, if we're truly this big Western bloc that we laid out in the 2022 National Security Review, this idea that the United States ties the West together. We tie our Democratic friends in the Pacific and our Western friends in the Atlantic, and we tie them together as a democracy bloc to therefore combat China, Russia, Iran. That's brilliant stuff, right? But obviously we're not going that direction anymore. But if we're going to pursue that, we would have to, there needs to be more common sense rather than this brutish, let's just throw out a number there and, it gets the president to leave us alone.
Well, what I like to see here, and I know I'm talking through a graphic on a largely audio show here, so bear with me. But when you look at the countries that are directly adjacent to Ukraine or Russia, and that we would argue see this threat the most, what we saw was the largest spike in their defense spending. Mm-hmm. So I think when we look at that, we say that is what you would expect if this threat is as real as we are saying that it is. The problem then is you look at the rest of Europe and you don't see that kind of jump at all. It's very hard to understand then, and I think this is a rational argument from folks in the United States. You're telling us this is a major problem. Your actions have not matched this. And we have comparisons. So Poland, again, this is from 2014 to 2023. Poland went from 1.9 to 3.9%. Poland is arguably one of the most hawkish countries in this entire thing. They're ready to get after Russia yesterday. We've got Estonia, went from 1.9 to 2.7. Lithuania, from 0.7 to 2.5. We've got Finland, from 1.4 to 2.5. Romania, from 1.4 to 2.4. Latvia, from 0.9 to 2.3. So when you look at the countries that are saying, yeah, this is real, this is no joke, they are taking action to back that up. And I think it's been a real problem that a lot of larger European nations haven't done the same.
But I
Now, a
mean,
lot of them are already at 2%, but that jump is only within a few nations.
but who? I mean, what large European nation hasn't? So like Germany pays the 2% now. They hadn't.
Do they now?
They do. They
From
hadn't
from
up.
from 14 to 23, they went from 1.2% to 1.5%.
That's outdated now because they definitely spend over
They
2%.
This is a 2023 graph.
Yeah, no. So they definitely spend over 2%. So it's just what, Italy, because France has always usually hit it. The UK has always hit it. I think it also. I mean, it also ignores the scale, right? So a Latvian 2% goes a lot less further than a French 2% or a British 2%, right?
Yeah.
So, I'm not making excuses for anyone. I just think we need a better measurement, right?
That's the takeaway here for sure. Yeah.
Because, like, the fact that Canada openly says they will not hit 2% until like 2035, I don't understand, because they can definitely afford it. I mean, maybe not anymore, but they can definitely afford it, and they have the Arctic there. And if they invested in their Arctic capabilities, it would be transformative for them and for the alliance and for the United States. Why they're not doing it, I don't know. But, like, there should be accountability, but this whole, like, I'm not going to enforce Article 5 just pushes us. It not only destroys our hegemony, right? Our hegemony, we've built this world that's not on dominance, but on cooperation, So as soon as we get rid of the cooperation, we're not, the biggest dog on the planet. And yeah, go ahead.
I don't want to think too far outside the box, but if we're going to try to get Canada to a 2% number, there's one solution on the table right now that appears to be coming more and more to the forefront.
Yeah, Trump says he wants to renegotiate the U.S.-Canada border. This all started off as a joke. I don't even want to say it's a joke.
I'm convinced it was a joke to start.
You think?
100%. I think it spiraled out of control.
My take is that I think people thought it was a joke, and then he was just serious. But basically, Trump wants to renegotiate the border. Trudeau, and I take his statement here very seriously, because as a leader, you don't say stuff like this lightly. He says the whole point of the tariffs is to bankrupt Canada so that the United States can annex them without any struggle. The Canadian foreign minister has said that the U.S. has threatened to steal their water and to redraw the border unilaterally. And they're so freaked out that Christina Freeland has talked to her British and French counterparts about...
Who is Christina Freeland?
She was the former deputy prime minister, and she may be the next head of the Labour Party. About basing British and French nukes in Canada in order to deter the United States, which is that's a pretty big step. That's kind of like it feels like an alternate reality, right?
It's a man in the high castle moment there.
Yeah. They're definitely going for it. The fact that he wants to renegotiate the U.S.-Canada border, like, what are you talking about? What do you mean you're going to renegotiate it? Most of the Canadian cities, outside of Quebec, are along the border, or at least close to the border, because it's really cold up north. So it just seems, but we're just threatening war here. And so Canada should hit their 2%, so they can at least, they're not going to be able to resist the U.S. military, but, you just need to, if you're going to get punched, you might as well give the other guy a black eye, right? And I think that's, they're
Go out swinging.
Yeah,
I remember I always get frustrated with the talking point when it relates to Russia and Ukraine, where somebody would say, wouldn't we be upset if Russia was trying to put troops in Canada or Mexico? And my pushback, first off, I don't think that's a good faith argument, because it suggests that there's NATO troops on the border with Russia and Ukraine, and they're not, but they are on the border of Russia elsewhere, and that's not where Russia attacked. So I think it's not a good faith argument. So I don't engage with those people. But my thought is always, we have done something wrong if Canada and Mexico are like, let's get Russian troops here on the border. We've screwed something up. And, like, that's the argument in Eastern Europe right now. It's like the reason they want NATO is because Russia keeps invading everybody. Like, that's why. But now all of a sudden, we're talking about how Canada in this case, might actually want some foreign troops on their border to because like, oh good, we're there. That didn't take long. I don't know what's happening with Canada. The tariff thing is confusing. I think as we record this, the tariffs are off again.
Yeah.
But the tariffs, like it's been this combination of Canada is not there's a trade imbalance, so we have to have the tariffs, and then it's about fentanyl, but then it's and then it's territorial changes. Like I can't. My gut says this is about trying to, like, bring manufacturing back to the United States in a sense, but I can't tell with all the distractions because, like, where's fentanyl fitting in with it? Like, if we're being honest, the fentanyl flow across the northern border should not be probably a top 500 priority.
Yeah, top 500. I agree. Not even in the top 500. Yes. Well,
It's in the category of, is it a bad thing? Yeah. But I think one of the reporters at the White House recently said that the amount was enough to fit in a suitcase for the entire year. So, like, not good. We should do away with that entirely, but it feels like misplaced energy for what we're putting into it.
Without a doubt.
Yeah, that's where I'm.
And it seems like, I'll say this about the tariffs. They're ridiculous. The market fell. But what's also interesting is it seems like we have a foreign policy / monetary policy that's dictated by how much Trump likes being on the phone. Because if you notice that every time Claudia Sheinbaum picks up the phone, I don't know what she says to him. But he's just like, all right, the tariffs are off. Again, she's foiled me. And then he announced a proclamation about Women's History Month. He said, we love women. All right. I don't know what she says to him on the phone, but she just picks up the phone and the tariffs go away. And this time he didn't even get like fake concessions like last time. He just, we're just not going to do them. But like he seems to have this idea that we're going to renegotiate with Canada. Like, what is he talking about? And there's this idea, I think, that like the United States could get a better deal, whatever that means, from a lot of its allies. But like the reason we don't is because when you squeeze these countries for all that they're worth, you kind of like maybe you get an immediate short-term goal, like a gain, but 6 months, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, they don't want to be friends with you anymore, right? Like the United States wasn't like, oh, we're not a colonial empire, right? So when you squeeze them, you kind of ruin the friendship. And I'll add on to that with the trade deficit thing. Canada, the whole reason it exists is because of we import oil from them. And not only do they give it to us at a discount, but they give it to us. That's really the whole reason for the trade deficit. And Canada, they can only buy so many oranges to make orange juice. But it's like there are only 40 million people. They can only drink so much orange juice. Like, how much more can they import? So we've lost the plot on Canada. We've lost the plot on Mexico.
The nicest people up there, man.
Yeah.
When they're upset with you, like, yeah.
Yeah. They're booing the anthem. And now what Trudeau went out there, he said, Donald, you're a smart guy. This is a very dumb thing to do. And what did they say? The Commerce Secretary for the United States, I don't know his name, but he just looks like the most annoying.
Lutnick?
Yeah, Lutnick. Let me ask you this. When you look at him, do you not get the feeling that he's just like your friend's really annoying dad? Like, doesn't he kind of have that look to him? Anyways, so are you Googling a photo of him right now? Yeah. So he, said that Trudeau should knock it off with insulting President Trump. And then Bessonnet called, what did he say? He said he was being, I don't know, he called him some kind of name, that he was just being difficult for the sake of being difficult and he should stop insulting the president. What is this? The Trump gets to insult every other world leader, and when they respond, all of a sudden they're the issue? The president's a snowflake, dude. I just don't get it here.
You know the streamer Jack Doherty?
Yes.
That's what he does, right? He hires bodyguards and he walks around and he starts fights and then he immediately backs out and lets the bodyguard deal with it.
Exactly that. Trump over here, Governor Trudeau. Trudeau says one thing. He just says, this is really dumb. All of a sudden, Trudeau, the enemy.
The decorum.
Trudeau, I mean, I've only threatened to annex you, steal your water, crash your economy. It's so rude of you to call me that.
Have you seen the chart that Mexico put out just a couple days ago, or yesterday, about fentanyl seizures at the southern border?
I've not, no.
So it's decreasing. Fentanyl seizures. So the amount that has been taken by Mexico, and it's decreasing from October to February. You see it going down, and there's a line in there that says this is when Trump came into office. And in February, it's green. So it's all brown, and then with Trump, it's green. So it looks like, big win, right? Like we hit the green metric. An interesting thing here with this graph. First off, it's trending down. So it's trending in the right direction, of course. But also, it's the seizures of drugs. It's an interesting metric to go off of because that means these are the ones that you stopped from going over.
Yeah.
You know what I'm getting at? Like, it's impossible to measure how many are going in.
Yeah.
But if we're seeing a decrease in the amount that is discovered, does that mean that less is going in and we're finding the same percentage? Or does it mean that the smugglers are getting smarter and we're finding a lower percentage than we were previously?
My understanding, at least I read this in the New York Times, that cartels are dramatically cutting back on the trafficking of fentanyl during this whole thing. Yeah.
That's good.
So like, it's kind of free falling. So yeah, I think it's that maybe they got better at smuggling, but I also think it's that there's less coming. But it's important to note that 95% of all fentanyl comes through legal ports of entry, and
is it 95%?
Yeah, 95%.
Oh.
And of that 95% that comes through legal ports of entry, 80% of the people trafficking it are U.S. citizens. So there's no foreign invasion. We're doing it to ourselves. So yeah, maybe we should look into that. And I would say do more at maybe get better customs. But I hate waiting in line at customs. So I actually don't know if I would accept a longer line at customs to stop fentanyl deaths.
Be a big ask. Yeah.
Look, sometimes, dude, I was at O'Hare once, and they're like, it's going to be a 2.5-hour wait. And I was like, this is crazy. Okay?
I'll tell you what, if fentanyl was 12-ounce water bottles, I would have smuggled 2 fentanyls through customs on my way home a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, there's just...
They missed them multiple times.
I feel like even... I was going to say other countries' airport security, but also ours. It's just like... I don't know. It doesn't seem like they just don't do anything, you know? It seems like security theory. And also, I'll say, I have TSA pre-check, and of course, this doesn't apply in other countries, which is such a travesty. But it is like a little... the one thing I don't miss about TSA, like the regular TSA, is that every airport has like their own home rules, you know? Like they just make up their own...
Of course you take your shoes off.
One shoe needs to be off, and your laptop needs to be open. And then at another airport, it's like, you need to strip naked and go through this detector.
I can't believe you didn't know this.
Yeah, right. And they're screaming at you.
You are stupid for not knowing this rule.
It's just, now they have TSA pre-check, they leave me alone. But some airports, like Boston Logan, do have their own home rules for pre-check. And it's just like, bro, I paid $80.
$5 for this.
Yeah, whatever it is. And $80 for 5 years, so I didn't have to take off my shoes. And they're telling me it's the main point on the website. Okay, so whatever.
Do you remember when you used to have to power on electronic devices? You'd put it through the thing, and then they would stand there while you turned on your laptop to prove, I guess, that it was a functioning laptop. Do you remember that?
Yeah, they still do. I still see it happen from time to time.
Oh, God.
I
had that at times where my laptop was dead. And it's like, all right, I'm going to have to go find a place to plug in to show you, and I don't know what that accomplishes. But apparently it didn't matter because we don't do that anymore.
Yeah, there was like that scare where they were putting bombs in the batteries or something like that.
Something tells me the ability for a laptop to turn on and still have a bomb in it exists, but I don't know. Who am I?
No, I wonder how much of the rules are real. But I mean, look, you've seen this time and time again. The Pentagon routinely tests the TSA, or not the Pentagon, DHS, and TSA is always failing. People are like, "Oh yeah,
really?"
They're like, "Oh, they let 4 handguns through at this one airport today." And it's like, yeah, man, like, pay them better, or like, I also feel like so much of the TSA rule enforcement is arbitrary, right? Like, I've seen people who look like mean fellas who, I don't take anything out of my bag. Like, all right, if you're gonna pull me over the side, you can go through it yourself, but I'm not taking it out, right? I've seen, and that doesn't. They just put my bag through because I'm so charming and handsome.
Yeah.
But for these mean-looking dudes, I mean, they get pulled over, they get searched and everything. I feel like it's such arbitrary enforcement.
Well, also, how many times have you walked through and the metal detector goes off and they're like, just go? It's like,
Yeah, just
all right,
yes.
fine.
Yeah, it's so arbitrary. They don't do. It's like when we were in Abu Dhabi at IDEX, and like you remember how the security was different on different days. Like
Oh,
one
yeah.
day there was a guy with like a whole wand patting you down. Other days they were just like, yeah, you're good to go. Like whatever, just lock the door on your way out. I don't know. I don't know how security works. Maybe what some of our listeners do, but
It's all magic and make believe.
the close out here though. Did you see that the Enola Gay was deleted from?
You can't get the name wrong if you're going to make fun
I'm
of other
sorry,
people.
Enola Gay. Enola Gay was deleted or attempted to be deleted from government archives because of DEI, because it has the last name Gay, which I believe is named after the pilot's mom, right? Her name
Yeah.
was Enola Gay.
The
Anyways,
plane
been
that dropped
deleted.
the atomic bomb on Hiroshima. Yeah.
Yeah. It's been deleted because apparently it's gay to use nukes now. So, not great. They
World
also,
bombers, man.
you had 26,000 other images, just deleting photos from World War II, Vietnam, because people have last names that are gay or, that like, say things about gender. Just kind of crazy. I don't understand the point of it. And I'd also wish that if you're going to go about doing things like this, just give it to the Smithsonian and say, we would like you to figure this out. Because I don't like these teenagers at Doge are just deleting things. At least the Smithsonian, you can have a story and look it over and go, okay, well, you want to delete DEI things. Well, the Enola Gay is not DEI. So it's
They
nonsense.
skipped that class. Something that's underappreciated in this whole thing is it's one thing to say in the future, no Black History Month or whatever the deals are that they're going with. You just make a calendar adjustment. But to go back and historically scrub everything you've ever posted that might be in violation is a serious effort. And it takes somebody time to have to do that. So like this one, it was reported by the AP with the Enola Gay. It was an AI scrub. And it made a ton of errors. So now they're having to go through with people and scrub this stuff. Like, is that really the best use of our time? Like, and the energy and the resources we have. I talked to a friend that's still active duty who said they've had to cancel ranges recently to where they practice shooting because they've had so much admin they have to sift through on this front to make sure they're in compliance with all these new EOs. He said, we are missing training because of it now. And that'll change over time, assuming these EOs don't continue to come out at the pace they are, but you don't just snap your fingers and this stuff is done. There's people that actually have to do it.
Yeah, no, you're right. I also don't understand the point of just wiping it all. Like, who does this serve, right? And this was like early on when they removed, at the Air Force Academy, they removed the exhibit or the course on the Tuskegee Airmen. And they called it malicious compliance. And it's like, it's not malicious. Read your own memo. You're just you're control effing words and then deleting them. So I mean, you saw this in the Army handbook too, right? There are pages and paragraphs deleted because what was it in the Air Force handbook? I know I just said Army, but in the Air Force handbook, they had something about how their mission was to ensure equality for all, like this kind of like American message of like life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And it just says paragraph deleted. And I was like, really? Like, what are we doing here? I mean, it's so dumb. And I'll tell you what, I think things are going so bad right now that we're going to have levels of wokeness you wouldn't even believe by next year. There's going to be a Hamilton #2, okay?
A woke backlash?
There's going to be Hamilton #2, and everyone's going to have 3 government-mandated pronouns, and they're going to vote for it by like 80%. I just think, like, they're pushing so hard against it that there will be a backlash. If they had just said, "No, we're not doing it anymore," I don't think there'd be an issue. But I think we know how it goes, right? Everything happens within the 40-yard lines, and once you pass the 40-yard line, you get sacked all the way back.
I do feel like there was general agreement of a lot of this stuff has gone too far. Again, there's folks in the military that were spending too much of their time, like talking to commanders that said they were spending an outrageous amount of their time on essentially like DEI type stuff, and it was taking them away from planning war games and executing the missions at hand. They were like, this is crazy. Like, it's not that we don't want to do it at all, but it shouldn't be 80% of our planning time. And I think most people would probably agree with that. But the swing in the other direction has been something.
Oh, without a doubt. It's unbelievable. Speaking of unbelievable, before we leave you all go, we have one last story we want to tell you. So Doge, now China and Russia are recruiting CIA and intelligence employees who were fired by Doge. Not clear why. If we're getting rid of all our allies, right? Getting rid of all our allies, all our alliances, we'd probably want more intelligence personnel since we're going to have to fill the gaps. But no, we are actually firing more people. And in addition to that, Doge is now putting up entire office buildings for sale. They put up the J. Edgar Hoover building up, the FBI headquarters. Real nice. But the real estate market's dead because everyone works from home. And they also have a return to work mandate. I know I'm laying this all out, and I hope, I'm sure they say it back to themselves in meetings, and I want to know how they think it makes sense. But anyways, when they're putting up these government properties up, they inadvertently exposed a CIA black site in Virginia. Do you know any more about that, Preston?
Yeah, so to shed some light on CIA black sites, people automatically assume that that's where we take like the Hamas protesters from Colombia and torture them in a dark basement. Black sites in the United States would just be a location that we don't want adversary. So we're getting spied on all the time, the U.S. government. Our intelligence agencies, the people that work there are being spied on all the time, which is why it was such a big deal a few weeks ago that the Trump administration had CIA send over an unclassified list of names of recent hires, because we want to keep those people's identities hidden. They work here in the United States undercover often. So they'll tell their family and friends that they work at the State Department or that they work at Treasury or at a nonprofit, or not usually nonprofits, usually a government organization that's not CIA, because they don't want to attract attention from foreign spies. So there are plenty of reasons why somebody who works at CIA might have to go into an office and do CIA-related work every day, but they don't want it to be so obvious because they're driving into Langley.
Yeah.
Who knows the number of projects? Maybe they're assessing a new Russian T-90 tank that we just pulled off the battlefield, or looking at some piece of Chinese tech that we have our hands on that's in a warehouse in Northern Virginia. There's a lot of benefits to China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran not knowing that Joe Smith works at CIA. Those are black sites. A lot of them are probably just boring office buildings that don't give away someone's identity because they're driving into CIA headquarters every day at 9 a.m. It's that simple. But the CIA officers being fired, I saw a lot of pushback on this because sometimes I think a lot of it is just emotional. And there's been a lot of warnings that, hey, when intelligence operatives get laid off in mass, it increases the likelihood that they could be recruited by an adversary. And people go, oh my God, then they weren't real patriots at all, and they shouldn't have had that access, and we should have scrubbed this better. But it's just a fact. And it's something we deal with anybody that leaves government service, especially at higher levels. There is a period of time where they are susceptible to be compromised. And there's a lot of different ways that can happen. Blackmail used to be a really big one. It still can be to a degree, but financial hardship is evergreen. And, what are these people dealing with right now that just got laid off? They're financial hardship, right? Like anybody who's tried to find a job recently, it's not like you step out of a job immediately into a new one the next day. They're probably facing some degree of financial hardship. Who knows how many of them actually have savings? They're probably frustrated. How many of you listening have been laid off from a job and you immediately are like, I love that company. That was great. I have no ill will at all. So even the most patriotic of patriots, it's entirely possible there's some in that group that right now are upset and might not make the most rational of decisions. And if nothing else, it just provides a very big list of possible targets. So let's say 1%, I'm making this up, 1% of people that China goes after end up turning into some sort of asset to provide intelligence. Maybe they've got 1,000 people per year that they go after. But if we're laying off thousands of CIA employees right now, they've got a lot more people today that they can target. So, it's a real issue. It's something that we'll probably have to dedicate a fair amount of resources to monitoring some of those people now and make sure that they're not immediately compromised.
We'll have to create like a jobs program or something for them so they don't defect.
What was the Pied Piper? Was that the show on HBO? Silicon Valley.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
You remember when they would fire the guys? They wouldn't have any job. They just send them up to the roof and they'd like drink margaritas all day. They would still come into work and they were just there because they just didn't want them going out to work for a competitor.
Yeah.
That. So we'll just keep them. Just, I guess, pay them and just have them go hang out on the roof at Langley or something.
Yeah. Well, I read this thing. So at first I saw someone say that we should just preemptively arrest all of them so they can't defect. And I thought, wow, you guys are so smart. I can't believe you guys can vote. But the other thing I saw, someone said that when Carter mass fired CIA operatives, a whole group of them created an entire campaign to subvert and undermine his entire presidency. And that's pretty bad, right? Donald Trump already has a lot of people who don't like him, but I mean, angering the CIA, I don't know. I think the question we will see here is, when does the CIA begin to start leaking? Because the one clash we saw three clashes between Trump and the CIA in his first term. The first one was over Russia, right? Where they came to the conclusion that Russia did influence the election in some way, and he said they're liars, blah, 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 and the CIA leaked and released things. Then, with Jamal Khashoggi, remember when the Saudis killed Jamal Khashoggi? Trump said it's impossible to know who it is, and the CIA then released the audio tape of it.
They said, we know who it is.
Yeah. And then the fourth one, I believe, was...
Third one.
The third one was... What was it? Was it COVID? There was something that maybe it was something to do with Iran, but yeah, then they leaked on them again. So the question is, when do they start here? Because surely there are a lot of people in Langley right now who I'd almost reckon to say a lot of them do not like the direction, cutting off aid from Ukraine, getting rid of our allies. And so I wonder when they do start to leak, because they will. You're already seeing the FBI leaking like crazy. I mean, that thing. I mean, you think the J. Edgar Hoover building was a piece of Swiss cheese. I mean, holy cow, it's like every day. But now with the CIA, I mean, I don't know. When do they start to leak? It'll be interesting to see, that is for sure. But, Preston, any last remarks on the CIA, on the FBI, on the destruction of U.S. hegemony, or anything? I'll tell you what, it's kind of crazy to me that the Zelensky meeting was only last week. Because to me, it feels like 4 months ago. It feels so long.
Yeah, I got nothing else, man. End of the international world order as we know it. I'm going to hop off and see what kind of things Trump has said this morning, because inevitably it's going to be wild. But yeah.
Any predictions for what we'll be talking about next week?
We are going to, yes. I think we're going to see some sort of drastic action taken against Russia by the Trump campaign.
They need to save face, or because they want to?
I think Trump's getting pissed. There's leaks starting to come out right now that he is frustrated that Russia does not appear to be, like what we talked about, like interested in negotiating, almost like he feels like he's doing his part and they're not doing their part. I think we might finally see something. Because as of right now, there's been no pressure on Russia at all. It's all been carrots. Russia gets the carrot, Ukraine gets the stick. Or as General Kellogg would say it, the 2x4 to the face. Did you catch that yesterday?
I did see that. He compared Ukraine to a mule. Yes.
Yeah, got hit in the face with the 2x4 to get its attention, which went over like a sack of bricks.
Also, how old is he? What is he talking about, hitting a mule? What are you, old prospector? What the fuck are you talking about?
I don't know. Yeah. I think there's increased pressure in the government right now to do something to pressure Russia, because they're not, like, there's no movement on their front. And if those leaks are correct that Trump is getting frustrated, then that's all it'll take. So that's my bold prediction is we'll see more aggressive stance towards Russia in the next week. What do you got?
I think, okay, so I'll say two things. I think maybe he does some kind of sanctions, right? Like they're being too overt with this pro-Russia stance, and things are falling out of Europe too fast. I mean, granted, every step of the way we've seen them double down, but I think something's going to happen where he intervenes in some way to save maybe the transatlantic alliance. Maybe he does something. Maybe he meets with Macron again. I don't know, but he's going to have to. Something's going to happen there. I think where he reaffirms maybe U.S. commitments. I don't know. I think maybe a half-assed Russia measure, but I don't. Other than that, I don't really know. I think. I think that's where we're going to be. We're going to be discussing the same topic, but it's going to be evolved. So a very bold take from me, but I think that's what will happen. And oh wait, one last thing I want to tell you about this. Okay, you ready for this? This is a scoop for everyone on listening at home and for Preston. I haven't told him this. So if you've noticed, you keep seeing King Charles everywhere, right? I never see King Charles. Granted, we're Americans, but like he's just not ever in the news. You know, it's just like what's Charles up to? No one knows, right? But now every single day for this past week, I've seen him maybe twice a day in the news. And he's showing up with Zelensky. He's with Justin Trudeau. He shows up on a British ship wearing Canadian military honors. And so apparently I reached out to a few diplomats I know and I said, what's going on here? You know, is this like the diplomatic angle is that, you know, Trump is known to like the royal family, so therefore you're gonna win him over this way? And they said, yeah, that's exactly what we're doing. You know, that we're like attempting to influence them. And then the New York Times wrote the same thing. The New York Times wrote that they're trying to place the idea that Ukraine good, Canada good in the back of Trump's mind by using King Charles to influence him. And they say that what could happen is that they just permanently, like his state visit to the UK, which, you know, he cares a lot about, that they're going to just indefinitely delay it until he, you know, stops, you know, until he creates a peace that is workable for Europe and Ukraine. And I thought, wow, that's really good. However, I know Trump likes the royals. I just don't know how much he actually cares about it.
It's royal psyop.
Outside of like, oh, the king likes me. So I don't know. We'll see if that psyop works, but they seem to think it will. But ever since this campaign started, I've only seen things get worse. So maybe they're going to have to they're trying to do some inception right now, and they're going to have to go another level deeper, all right, into the mind, because it is not working. And with that said, though, people like, comment, subscribe, follow, give us 5 stars. Preston, what do you think? Every week on Spotify, we have a poll, and our poll last week was, why do you think Trump's changed his mind on Ukraine? And of course, that poll is just, he didn't, because everyone got the privilege or perhaps dishonor of having to watch the Zelensky thing after I came on here so rosy saying, oh, he loves Ukraine now. So what do you think our poll should be this week? Is it over? I mean, we've already done is it over, right? I think we've done that like 3 times now.
Let's see. How about first cabinet member
To resign. Oh,
to
that's
be pushed out? Not resign, pushed
be
out.
pushed out. Okay.
Something. Who's the first one? I think we keep it within our realm.
Yeah,
You know, national
Rubio,
security
Walt.
type stuff.
Yeah.
I'd be interested to see that
Yeah.
because it's going to be. It's going to be one of them. I don't know the last time a president had all of their secretaries stay for all 4 years.
Joe Biden.
Did he seriously have all of them stay all 4 years?
Yeah, Jake Sullivan and Anthony Blinken were there all 4. Yeah.
All right. Well, Trump in his last administration went through secretaries like it was nothing. So
That's true.
that sounded not the way I meant for it to sound. But
Also,
you know what I
probably
mean.
true though. Yeah. So, all right. Yeah, we'll do that. Anyways, like, comment, subscribe. We'll see you next week, and we appreciate you watching. Bye. Wait, I forgot to close. Here we go.